Okay, great. So I'm just going to ask a series of questions. I might ask a follow-up, otherwise I probably won't say a whole lot. So question number one, who is John Vervaeke and what does he mean to you?
I found John's work for the first time, I think 3 years ago or so. And at that time, I was also just going also through kind of like a phase of I was more depressed than than so and then when I encountered John's work, it kind of for me it filled a hole in the culture. I mean, I had read philosophers and thinkers that were addressing the problem, but he was the first person that was really like, oh, he's like alive, he's like at the same time, right, as we are, and he's speaking from this point now from the 21st century. And the second thing I also really admired about him is that he also tried to bring it into harmony with the scientific and cognitive, right, with a cognitive science background. So, and bring that into a harmony. So that was one thing that I also really liked about his work. So what does he mean to me? No, I'm just really grateful for all of his work and the spaces he has opened up, the spaces for practice, the spaces for meaningful dialogue, the spaces for meaningful philosophical exploration, also apart from the universities, because as we know, the ecosystem, let's say, of the universities also is suffering from many problems today. And I'm just happy to be able to participate in this nexus that has opened up, and with him really one of the central figures in that nexus, I would say.
All right, question number two, great. What are the 4 ways of knowing, and why are they an improvement on how most educators teach about the mind and human knowledge?
So, right, the 4 ways of knowing are propositional knowing, procedural knowing, perspectival knowing, and participatory knowing. And right, John would argue, right, that we are in a sense locked into propositional tyranny, as he has sometimes called it. So we only, right, when you go to a class, you get a bunch, right, or in a school class, right, you have to learn a bunch of propositions about a given topic, but the propositions don't tell you anything about how to act in the world. They don't give you any more knowledge beyond the propositions. They are exhausting themselves in themselves, so to say, if you just stay in the realm of propositions. So it's important to cultivate again the other forms of knowing. And I think, right, what John would argue is, right, that it was especially the monastery as an addition to, let's say, the university, where we did wisdom practices, where we could learn and seriously play with perspectival knowing and participatory knowing. And we've, in a sense, lost those forms of knowing. And I would argue then, right, that they are now filled with other things. So, right, then you don't do wisdom practices in your free time, but you go partying every weekend or so in the universities. And that, right, that also creates really a a hole in the culture, because we have people who are very skilled, let's say, with with propositional knowledge, right, with logic, with arguing and so forth, but we lack all those other, especially, right, the last two, the perspectival and the participatory forms of knowledge. And they, right, important is, I think, right, in his work, also in John's work, right, they help you create meaning in life. They help you to couple deeper and better with reality. They help you to fall in love with reality. And yeah, I would say that's the gist of it, and why they are so important.
Could you just define, especially the last two, the participatory and the perspectival, just in your mind?
Okay, so as I have understood it, perspectival knowing is, right, how to be able to play with perspectives. I would say, for example, one thing that I think there's even research on this, right? One thing that teaches you this is, for example, right, when you read a lot of books, because in literature you learn, right, you learn how to see with someone else's eyes, so to say. You learn, okay, now for example, when you read, I don't know, and you read about female protagonists, then maybe you can also see, okay, this is how maybe females act and feel in the world, and it helps, right, to enhance, let's say, emotional intelligence, or just this perspectival intelligence, so to say, to adopt and to be able to also, right, to have other perspectives. And right, if we don't have that, we always just see the world with our own eyes, and we always get locked into our own perspective, or the perspective of just our group. And then we often fall into tribal thinking and these things. And participatory knowledge for me is in the deepest level how to participate with reality, not just to be a, so to say, a subjective agent in an objective reality, but to really transjectively, co-creatively participate with reality. Because, right, that then helps you also to overcome those feelings of isolation, the feelings of being locked into yourself, being locked just into your own world. But to have this, to have access, let's say, to this moreness that is always there, but we can't, right? We can never access if we're just locked, let's say, if we're just having a propositional access to the world.
Awesome. So the next question number 3. What are the 3 orders, or maybe like describe them in your own words, like nomological, normative, and narrative? And how does thinking in these terms help someone live a more intelligible and meaningful life?
3 orders.
Yeah, do you understand those? Are they hard to understand? Like, do you care about those concepts maybe?
I don't have the concept now, and I don't have it in my head now. I would need some help.
So he talks about really early in his series, a nomological order, which is conceptual, maybe science, and then
okay.
A normative order. He uses Plotinus sometimes as a great example of someone you could learn about the normative order from. So I don't know if it's like mysticism or social normativity, but there's this like non-conceptual normative order. And then the third order is narrative. And so he has a lot of videos where he talks to people about maybe the overvaluing of narrative or the role of myth and narrative. So he kind of breaks the world into these 3 like layer cakes. Are you familiar with that? Maybe if it's not so familiar, we could just totally skip this question.
No, I've heard about it. I'm at the nomological, and it's not in my head. I don't quite.
What about the narrative or the normative orders?
Good, right? I could talk about that, right? I think what I recall, he had those arguments with some of the Christians, like Paul Vanderklay and what's her name?
Mary.
Mary Cohan or
Cohan. Yes, that's what I was
yeah.
trying to pronounce it.
And I think also with Jonathan Peugeot, right? I think he had those arguments, right?
Right. So
they
like,
only see the narratival order, let's say, as the highest order, that kind of right, that we participate in this, let's say, in the story of the revelation, and John would then say, okay, there are other orders that we ought to pay attention to, right? One is the normative order. So let's, right, and I think, right, that this is more from Neoplatonism, right, with the constraints and everything, right, with the emanation aspect of reality, and then I guess with the nomenological, I'm not sure, but when you said, right, with science,
so just to give you an example, like a scientific term will say there's a nomological network, and so maybe like justice, and then like law, and processes to like do justice, concepts related to law like fairness or inequality, like all of those would be in the nomological network of the concept of justice. So like, is there a nomological order in life? John might argue, yes, that it's intelligible. Like we can understand the nomological aspect of reality.
Okay.
And that it's worth pursuing, I guess. Like, why would it be valuable to try and get better at understanding the world nomologically, maybe?
Yeah, okay, the nomological nexus, or that kind that was not in my mind.
Okay, let's just skip that. So I think
but
go ahead.
I can work with it. So right, this is especially right important in Nishitani, although he phrases it differently. So for him is also like he really thinks that, right, that this embeddedness into, let's say, a narratival order also, right, caused some of the, right, this especially is a certain, right, is an important factor in the meaning crisis. And this was recognized earliest, right, by Nietzsche, because Nietzsche saw, right, okay, this narrative breaks down, and then suddenly we don't, right, we can't participate in the story any longer. And now right, we now have to find different goals. We have to kind of like fill, right, we have to fill the end of the narratival order with something else, just to make our stories meaningful, so to say. And right, then we could talk, right, about the then that there are other orders, right, that we ought to consider, right?
And that's fine. I don't want to, if this isn't something you're so familiar with his work, and we don't have to kind of pull things out. So the next question number 4, what are the barriers to appreciating, understanding, or applying ideas from John's work?
I think this is a criticism that I think has often been leveled towards him, right? That it's just too long and too difficult to get into it as a, let's say, as a normal person. When you, I don't know, you work, I don't know, 40 hours a week, and maybe you have other, you're occupied with other things, but you're right, maybe you have you experience, right, that you don't have meaning in life, and then it's just maybe you will find it hard to find time to listen to all of John's work, and to maybe also, right, to have time to digest it and really to, right, get into it. And I think that's really one of the great problems of his work, that there has not been yet kind of like a digestible summary of it. So it's really also accessible for people who don't have so much time to get into it, who also not maybe so philosophically or scientifically educated, so they can really work with his whole conceptual vocabulary that he introduces. Apart from that, I don't have anything at my mind now.
I'll ask one follow-up question. Do you think, because you've taught some people that are in the same kind of space as he's in and work with people like that, have you seen people that have jumped in easily, or do you have any like first thoughts on how to make it more accessible, other than creating like a 5-hour version of the 50 hours, or without losing the value, I guess, or dumbing it down?
I can maybe, so for example, my brother was, he was really, he liked really Jordan Peterson's work, and I thought, but like the whole, right, the whole philosophical avenue is to it's often, right, he told me once, it's too difficult for him, it doesn't like it, he can't listen to it. But for some reason, like Jordan's work was much more accessible there, for some reason that I don't know. And
if you had to guess, what would you guess?
I guess it, like, I think with John, right, John introduces so much new vocabulary in his speech. He said that even once, right, that when he talks, for example, to Christopher, I think they talked once, this was a year ago, so he talked with Christopher and Andrew Sweeney, and then he said, well, with Christopher, they always talk in their language, so to say, that they have almost co-created together, and that they sometimes need other people who break into that just to get them out of their talk, so to say. Because often, right, then an outsider doesn't understand often just what they're saying, because they use so many words that might be alien to them. So I guess it would, right, it could maybe be helpful to just break some of the concepts down to make them I don't know, to a language that is more familiar to, let's say, people who are not so skilled, let's say, with the philosophical vocabulary. And that's even, right, I mean, I can speak it, right, personally, right, I had Latin and Greek in school, and everyone who didn't have Latin and Greek, right, my German teacher once told me, right, when you learn Latin, you will learn to appreciate your language in a whole new way. You will see it with different eyes after you learn it. The problem is when you then also create so many foreign words with, let's say, Greek origin or Latin origin. Like many people who haven't studied that ancient languages, they just, it's very hard. They don't know what the root words mean. They can't imagine anything to those words, and then it becomes very difficult for them to follow that whole conversation. And that's even like a dividing line, let's say, between people who are educated in the classical languages and those who are not. It creates a kind of schism between those two, just from a linguistic perspective. And right, there are these, I mean, we just had them, right? Nomological order, narrative order, and so forth.
Good. So the next question says, what does he mean by cultural cognitive grammar? Are there any tools or resources that you could imagine helpful to yourself or someone else in this respect?
I would say, right, a cultural cognitive grammar is in a sense the almost the soil we are walking on, the thing we are embedded in, if we want or not. Right, there was this powerful passage in his I think right in his Meaning Crisis series, where he was kind of like emphasizing, right, that Christianity is like, right, it's the ground we are walking on, but we treat it with contempt. And right, this was the great Nietzschean insight, was that, right, we are, so to say, we are embedded in a Judeo-Christian, maybe Greek cultural cognitive grammar, but because like the foundation has collapsed, it's kind of like the guiding star of like with God has been undermined by the scientific truth. Now we're still locked into that grammar, but all weird things happen because we are still in the grammar, but like the orientation has collapsed, and that, right, that causes them. I don't know, that I would bring up some examples. Like today we see this, right, a lot of people talk that science is something we have to believe in, like almost religiously. So right, that's kind of the classical scientism. And scientism is something, right, that's not really what science is about. And we shouldn't, right, believing in science like it's a god or so, like believing in the scientists or the experts. That's just, for me, that's just an error in thinking. It's where let's say our cultural cognitive grammar is doesn't really work anymore. So maybe to write, maybe give a definition, right? It's those ways, right? It's a way, right? We're so to say trained in participating with reality in certain ways, both culturally, that means in distributed cognition, right? I think that's why it's called cultural cognitive grammar. So in distributed cognition, right? Because we have language, we have certain concepts we use, we have certain, right, also just things that are purely intelligible. So not right, and those often can, right, they can produce difficulties, right, in understanding, like God. Because when you talk maybe to an Asian person or someone who is not brought up in this cultural cognitive grammar of ours, then the concept of God might call, okay, what do you really mean by God? What is, right? And I've noticed this when I was in Japan, that there are, so right, there are difficulties in understanding that concept, because they're just different grammars. And the tools, I think, right, it's right that the grammar is so over close that I would say it's often difficult, right, to see it, right, to really realize it. So right, this narratival order, right, we don't even see where this is active, how we can
while these are really challenging
it.
philosophical issues, like, is there something touchable or something that you could think of, especially you as a teacher, that does help people learn? Like, because you've even talked about paradoxicality and shunyata and really, really dense concepts with people. And like, how do they learn those difficult words when you've seen them in your own vision?
I would, right, to have a dialogue with two cultural cognitive grammar, so to say, of course, involves a lot of I mean, okay, analogies, metaphors, things to really make it easier. Especially, right, shunyata is something that has caused a lot of trouble for Westerners, because we can't really think about nothing. I mean,
Can
right,
you maybe just, I don't mean to interrupt you, but can you think of an example where you actually saw someone go, aha, I get that concept, even of shunyata, what you're talking about, maybe in one of your group courses or somewhere, even at social? Maybe not the experience, but conceptually, I mean.
Problem is, right, that those things that can't just be analyzed conceptually, but they have to be experienced kind of like transformatively almost. So it's often right with God, when you make a concept out of God, then you won't be able to, right, experience God, or, right, know God, not knowing God conceptually, but know God really existentially, let's say. And right, then this is then another problem, right? That so many of our courses are again only taught propositionally, and we've kind of lost the element of the participation, right? This is why John emphasizes so many times the religion nothingness, for example, or Zen. You could also say Zen, right? Or Buddhism. These are things, right, that have to be studied together with a praxis, together with meditation, together with that whole ecology of practice that has been established in Buddhism. The shift from nothing to nothing, or from nothing to shunyata is, I mean, that's one of the most tremendous, like it's really like your whole worldview changes. So this is only something that you can experience for yourself. It's and I've not witnessed it in a class.
Do you think John's work in general is something that people need to be like trying to experience more than learn intellectually, or is that just one case?
Yes, definitely. But
Why?
because especially in the then concepts like suchness, moreness, shunyata have a kind of they have a very strong place in his thinking. But I remember, for example, Seb, right? He, for example, said once, right, I don't know what moreness means. I don't also know what suchness really means. So and that was, I think this was very honest. So I suppose there are many people who might feel that way. So this is definitely something that for his work, right, that it should be experienced, and we need more. Again, that's why I think he's also supporting institutions like Willow that emphasize more the practical aspects of his work. That there are those communities of practice. So we experience, right? We experience this. We practice. This is the most important thing of I would say also of his work. Almost the other thing is, right, it's the prelude. It's an invitation, I would say, but practicing is really the most important thing, I think.
So great. So question number 6 builds on that as well. So it says, what does he mean by ecology of practices? And we'll just start with that, and then I have a couple of follow-up questions.
Yeah, an ecology of practice is right, it's not helpful if you just do, let's say, one practice, but that you have a network of practices that help to correct each other and help to also build on each other, support each other. And he often emphasizes that it's good to have a range of practices, right? I think by the contemplative practice or meditative practice, then a moving practice, a dialogical practice, and often Lectio Divina, as I think mentioned. So right, maybe you can also think of more. I had my own ecology of practices diagrams.
Well, great. You have a diagram. Wow. Could you maybe describe that? And then we'll just go through. I have a list of practices. So if you just describe your ecology, and then I'll just go through the list if anything's missed.
No, I would definitely say, right, what I see often also in Zen Buddhism is, right, you don't just have meditation, but then, right, this meditation was then also it influenced so many other things, right? So like for example, flower arrangement.
Have you done that?
Like,
Like, I want to stick to you specifically, like a real person with
yeah,
real ecology. Yeah.
I was in Japan. I was for like half a year in a flower arrangement class. I also, this was in a workshop in Poland, but right, I did tea ceremony. And especially right in Poland, they had they like they even studied with the Urasenke in Japan. I don't know, this is very detailed, but
That's
like,
okay. I think people in this project would want to get an idea or use this to get a picture
okay,
of a real person and like what they do in a day or a week or a month that might be influenced by John's thinking.
okay, so there, right, the tea ceremony of right, there are a few people from the West who are invited to study it for 1 year in a kind of intensive year. So you go there to the headquarter and then you study this for like 6 days a week, every day, like 10 hours. You study tea ceremony from like the bottom up. That's called Midorikai. This is when you're interested in tea ceremony, then you've heard of these things. And this is very intense. So in Poland, there are two people who did that Midorikai, and they do it very strictly, right? You meditate before the practice, and then you actually do it. So that's just one example where meditation then found expression in, let's say, an artistic domain. But so it's with many other of those traditional arts in Japan, like landscaping, or landscape gardening, or some calligraphy masters. And so, but right, they even, right, there's this famous story with Hakuin, right, that he got the Zen sickness, so his body got stiff, and then he searched for a Taoist master in the who was dwelling in a cave outside of Kyoto, and he taught him this Buddha meditation, for example, which is a kind of like Taoist imaginative practice, that helps you to just become again more flexible, more homed, let's say, in the body. Because if you do meditation for a long time, just your body becomes stiff. And that's just, I would say that's one example where we can see the value of having more practices, and then really an ecology of practices. So I would say it's good to have maybe an imaginative practice, whether this is reading, right, that you read fiction, whether this is something like with drawing mandalas, whether this is
Well, let me go through a
maybe,
list. I don't mean to interrupt, but just because I have a pretty similar list, so I just want to ask you.
okay,
So do you have any like daily or weekly meditation or contemplation practices? And could you just briefly describe it?
yes, I do meditation regularly. So this is
Long or
just
how often, or just so that
okay.
someone could get a realistic picture of what a person might do?
Okay, so I meditate in the morning, and in daily life, I try to do it at least once a day for like half an hour, 45 minutes, an hour. This has a little bit been disrupted by the pandemic, because this caused everyone to go to retreat into the homes. But in general, right, I try to do it at least once a day, and sometimes twice, in the morning and in the evening.
And then do you have any chanting, singing, or dancing practices?
And if I would go to a Zen community, then there's also chanting. So this is right, reciting the sutras, the Buddhist sutras. That's usually a fixed element in most Zen gatherings.
What's the benefit of
how
that? I'm sorry, go ahead.
the benefit of it? It's very immersive, right? it's very immersive and very powerful. If you learn right how to do it. It takes time because you need a lot of you need your lungs have to be trained well, because you need to just like when you're a singer, right? You need a certain training into it, so you can really practice with all your effort, so to say, and for a, I don't know, an hour or so. It's quite challenging in the beginning, but it's very powerful.
And then do you have any other walking or moving practices?
I did some qigong a while ago. I should do that more often. Now, since the pandemic, I really go strolling every day for like 1 to 1.5 hours, and that's just I try to be there as attentive of the environment as possible.
And what's the benefit of that?
Just walking also helps you to it helps with thinking. For some reason it really helps, right? You can get your thoughts in order. You It's hard to describe. It brings, right, it's maybe we can, right, John often talks about disruptive strategies, and like taking a walk or taking a run or jogging or cycling or so. It's like a disruptive strategy, I would say. It really helps to when you're, say, when you're stuck with something, and then you go out, and then it really helps you to smoothen or your thought process or your insight making also. It's a small, I would say it's a small disruptive strategy that just helps, and to
Do you
get
have any
clear.
other, I'm sorry, do you want to add something? I'm sorry.
No.
Okay, I was going to say, do you have any other concentration, visualization, mantra or speech based or other practices that we just haven't talked about yet?
Others. No, I mean, right, I tried out mandala drawing. Yes, sometimes the visualization practices. And I think that's it. Yeah, no, not so much. No, I can't think of anything else now.
Do you participate in any social practices, communities of people, or do retreats or spiritual pilgrimages?
I would like to. It's definitely something I would like to do in the future. But again, this has become a little bit difficult now.
Even with social practices, I'm sorry.
What was it? What's
like,
a social practice?
could be circling, could be anything, like anything that's maybe built to make you wiser, make you have more meaning in your life, have more well-being. And like John doesn't maybe talk a lot about social practices, but he has before said that like an ecology should have a social element. So do you do anything consciously to participate in any wisdom communities, social development, like any of those kind of like more interpersonal, I guess would be maybe be a good way to frame it?
No, I mean, I think that the only really social practices that I do is with you, right? With the
What
fellowship, with the
describe that? Yeah, someone that
circling.
didn't know us, like what is that stuff? Yeah.
So Robert and myself have set up a kind of weekly practice group where we do things like dialectic into dialogos, philosophical fellowship, circling, etc. And right, I have also talked with Guy Sengstock a number of times. So and right, we did circling in this seminar course. So right, what's the kind of right we for example we read a thinker and then try to invoke that figure together through the passage that we read. And this is also very it's not just an intellectual practice. I think it's more a social practice. It really opens up spaces of intimacy, right? Spaces of communal belongingness also, that right, that really help you also to get closer to those who are doing the practice with. I haven't done circling in person or so, but if there would be an opportunity at some point, I would really enjoy doing that as well.
Great. So I have a last question, but if it's already been answered, you can just skip it. So it says, do they improve your life, or do you wish you did more of them? And that's just all practices, like anything we've talked about so far.
Yes. Yes. I definitely, right. I am always I'm always looking forward to the practices. I really enjoy doing. And I almost feel right. I feel almost hungry when I haven't done them in a while. So I don't know. It's not when you feel hungry, right, in the stomach or so. But I had this actually last week. I felt hungry here in the heart. It's like a kind of a weird pain in the heart where I didn't really thought, oh, now I'm hungry for fellowship. No, it's really
Wow.
well, maybe yeah, maybe one thing that I might want to add, that there are also, I haven't heard John talk about this much, right? But there are also, right, there are a lot of sexual therapies and sexual practices. And I mean that there are sexual therapists, and even right for relationships in general, for partners. I would if I don't know if there's any expert, anyone who is developing anything in that kind of space, I would also be thrilled to hear about that, if there is anything. We haven't we haven't touched about that so much in this space, but I would really be thrilled to hear anyone, or if there's anyone who's also developing something innovative in that kind of realm. All right, can you remember? Can't remember that there were any people on there who would really talk about like the sexual elements in all of this.
He had a recent interview with a lifetime meditator, essentially, and that they shared a story where some sexual practices essentially eroded and then ultimately destroyed the community that this really serious meditator was participating in.
Yes.
And go ahead.
This is because this is so, he talked about the right sexuality in one of his last videos, I think. And that right in also our culture, we don't really have a right relationship to this. Not really, right?
I was going to ask, do you think it's fair to say that like maybe our culture has a taboo against sexuality, or has some kind of like fear of it or something?
Sometimes there is a taboo, and that then is often completely inverted into, right, and you have those weird Netflix movies, right, where I don't know, where we have, in a sense, we have a hypersexualized culture, but then in the sense, right, and what in reality is happening, that more and more people have social anxiety or anxiety regarding relationships, regarding their bodies and so forth. And then just many people are lonely, right? And so that there's a great, even this has been exacerbated by the pandemic in like staggering numbers, a kind of loneliness crisis with young people. I just bring it up, right? Because there are some wisdom communities who have suffered from, let's say, sexual abuse. That's why I think it's an important topic that I would like to address more, and that we, not like, let's say, the Catholic Church that kind of like just try to pretend, yeah, there is no problem, right? That the body doesn't have this, but right, that we have a healthy relationship with our bodies, and that we also maybe have sexual practices that do not cause harm, like they so often do, also in wisdom communities. So that would be something that I would also really like to, that there's more recognition of that topic. I think it's very important. Because as soon as you have a wisdom community and you have both sexes involved, of course you also have sexual tensions and sexual energies, and we need also practices that involve them, and to so we can work with them. I think it's very important that we don't forget about this.
Great. So we've already kind of talked about this, but there's a follow-up question I want to ask. I'm just going to ask the first question first. Is there a meaning crisis, which I think we've established? What is real about it in your life or in the lives of your friends or in the social cultural world at large? So maybe just describe, or yeah, there's the question. If you want to just say a few things about it. Is it real? What is it?
Yeah, I mean, it's real, but maybe real in a different sense. I don't think we live in a kind of meaning famine, but right, I would bring up the Nietzschean point that we have too much meaning. So right, there is they are all everywhere. There are ideological narratives we could participate in if we would wish to. We have those attention monsters, right? Advertisement and I don't know, right? All these images that are floating around, right? The smartphones, the cities, the billboards, and so forth. So I would say, right, we are in a sense bombarded with meaning, but it's disordered and chaotic, and we need orders, and we need ways of knowing, so we can kind of like structure this overwhelming sense that the world throws at us. And right, then what happens, right, if we just, if nothing happens, then often, right, people often then collapse. Then this is really nihilism. Nihilism is, okay, everything that is so to say grounded in nothing, is grounded by an abyss, and I cannot see any value at all in anything. That's in a sense, it's one aspect of nihilism, I would say, where really all things suddenly, right, all activities, all things suddenly become meaningless. And right, because right, they are idols in a sense. It's like you throw, like you hammer on them once and they collapse, they break apart. You see there's nothing inside. So we really need those ways of knowing and those orders that we've established before, that so we can right, structure our world again. So we really have it meaningful, and right, that it's let's say it's coherent, it's ordered, it's not overwhelming. This is right. This is precisely what happened with the advent of the sciences. Pascal or Schopenhauer, you can read this, right? Suddenly, right, this infinite space that has opened up is terrifying. It's terrifying, right? And that let's say that narratival home of Christianity, this is also often not really viable anymore. And now we are unhomed, so to say, and we need a new home. We need a new home, and that's, I think, the task for us, so to say, who want to solve the meaning crisis.
And then are there ways you are thriving or you see others thriving right now? And like in that respect, what are you or they doing differently?
Mm-hmm. So one thing, right? I've participated in most courses from Johannes Niederhauser's Halcyon Academy, and he's right. He's just doing philosophy courses, but in a kind of traditional sense, really often open-ended. Everyone can talk about whatever comes up. And what we, for example, noticed is that if you really give people the space to develop their own thinking, their own thoughts, and also, right, maybe in the forum, right, you can also just start writing, and you writing with others. So like others can read it, others can comment on it, and so forth. You become more coherent, and you become more, your thinking becomes more flexible, I would say. And right, this of course then helps you, right? You can develop some thoughts in your head. You can talk longer with more coherence about more difficult topics, and that is one thing I would say that really help you just for your philosophical endeavors, let's say. But again, also like the social practices that we are doing, right? Sometimes, right? Sometimes it just takes a kind of a perceived home, like a space where you can feel, okay, here I can be myself. Here I can open up. And then people really, they show themselves, they put down the mask they had often for months and years, kind of role that they didn't really enjoy or that they were forced into. And then they can just openly talk. And it's really, this maybe I want to emphasize this, right? Intimacy is something that is also, it becomes an issue in those things that we are doing, whether it's with Johannes classes, right, or with you want to be, because we are exploring difficult ideas and often painful ideas and often personal things. It causes, right, it also is, it makes us all vulnerable. And we need, right, we also need spaces where we can express this vulnerability. And we can not like maybe this conception of a safe space where you just block yourself of all things that aren't good, or that you think are bad or so, but that you really have a space where you can be vulnerable, and you can also let things that are dark and depressing and harmful and harsh and difficult, that we can all let them be, so to say, and we can work with them, and we can endure and help each other in our own vulnerabilities. That's really important also for this. And I think it's important for thriving in general, right?
Yeah, that was the question. Yeah. Great. So question number 10. If you're really interested in John and his work and you get it, what do you think would help other people get more out of the things he talks about, his series, or anything else? So we've talked about this a little bit. Is there just anything that doesn't exist in reality, or that people in his world aren't just using, that could help those kind of people get more out of him?
I think, right, but I think that's on the way, right? Just a book publication. So because it's just easier often with books when you can read his ideas. I've heard a lot about John, but I've never read anything from John. But that's kind of like, that's actually quite weird. So that's usually not, right, it's not the case. it's usually the other way around, right? First I just know most people from their writings. But with John, it's like the complete opposite. I've never read anything from John. I only know him from his talks and from his lectures. So I would write, I think just a book that would just help, where his ideas are outlined in a coherent way. So just for people to read it, that's, I think, would just help. And then maybe other writings from him. I don't even know if he had written anything else. I would be thrilled to read something of him. So that might maybe help. I think this is true for most people in this space, right? I think everyone has heard him talk, but I guess most people haven't read anything.
I've read more Plotinus than Vervaeke. Yeah. So good. All right. So great. So are there any celebrities, podcasts, figures from literature, music, or art from modern times that John reminds you of?
I mean, he's in a sense, he's similar, I guess, to those people like I don't know, Alan Watts or so, who are really into like everything, like Christianity, Neoplatonism, Buddhism, but we're also actively practicing. So, right, I know scholars who are very interested, right, maybe just into like the ideas, into this whole, right, just into the philosophical ideas or the religious concepts or so. But right, John is also one of those people who really emphasize the practices, and there aren't so many people like that. So I could only think of someone like Alan Watts, maybe, who are really also maybe you can even find lectures of him on YouTube. But I mean, he was obviously also very strongly emphasizing the practices, and not just right, not just he's also not just like a sectarian or so who's kind of like just in one camp, but he's really open for everything, which I love. And yeah, so there aren't many people like that, I would say, who really try to incorporate everything, so to say, and practice so much, and are also welcoming and open to all traditions and all cultures. It's very, yeah. Other apart from that, I can't think of so many people.
Excellent. Do you do any activities that expand your vocabulary in the last 1 to 5 years or regularly, including language learning, reading for personal reasons, public speaking classes, etc.?
I can tell you that watching John's lectures has definitely expanded my English vocabulary. I've even myself, I would say, like just maybe speaking for English, besides my Japanese learning, but English as a non-native speaker, I've really picked up a lot of. I've really become more fluent, I would say, in the last years. Not that I wasn't fluent before, but I've become just more fluent and more confident, let's say, with myself, even in difficult situations. So and I've also just expanded my vocabulary a lot with all these lectures. So that's, yeah. But apart from that, I have a very large vocabulary in German already, because I had Latin and Greek, so that those terms don't frighten me. And I also read always a lot. So yeah.
Do you enjoy these things and think they add value to your life?
Yes. I enjoy them. They add value to my life, definitely. Yeah.
I guess maybe a more open-ended question, like why do you enjoy them, or what's an aspect you enjoy about them, or like what's one way you think that they add value?
No, I think what I really I was always trying to find friendship and fellowship, and in a meaningful way, where we, so to say, where we you don't just do some vacuous activity together, which you then forget altogether after you did it, but really trying to do some meaningful, just sharing space and time in a meaningful way. And I think there's all the values in there, so I wouldn't say more beyond
Okay,
that.
great. No, that's awesome. What are one or two salient things John taught you about being wiser, aspiration, character, loving others, or the meaning of life? What meaning in life, I mean.
The first thing that comes into my mind is he really tries to give you a number of ways how to just fall in love with reality again, and to become a, let's say, really a philosopher, a lover of reality, a lover of wisdom, not just in the, and again, from many traditions, right? Not just the East, not just the West, but traditions of both traditions. Yeah, one thing I really enjoyed is the fellowship. I mean, we talked about this also the other day, right? The just the philosophical fellowship. I think it's such a beautiful and powerful practice to engage in concert with other people. So that he introduced ourselves on his YouTube channel to that practice. That was one thing that I really enjoyed, and that's why I also did it then with Guy Sangstock very recently after that. And also just his humility, because right, his like when you have such a, right, you're a professor and right, you really have a wide array of knowledge. You're skilled in many traditions. You're also very you're very, let's say, confident in speech. You're very, right, I mean, this can, right, figures like that can be daunting, right, if you encounter them, if someone who's just can be overwhelming, right? But I think this humility really helps. So he's also right. He's not beyond somewhere, but he feels close. He feels near. He's very. He tries to be inviting to really a lot of people from a great number of backgrounds and traditions, and not to get ahead of himself, maybe because he's right, he has this vast pool of knowledge also. And also, right, I mean, I see him sometimes, right, judging about things in a sense, right? I mean, there's clearly things that are in the culture that aren't good and they should be called out. but he doesn't get resentful about them. And that's also right. This one trap you can easily fall into, that you just become cynical or resentful, or hostile even. But at least for myself, I haven't had this sensation that he has those feelings, let's say.
Excellent. Do you know what kind of pizza a monk orders? One with everything. It's a joke John said once. All right, so these are the last two questions. They're just fun questions to play with. What does John have in common with Taylor Swift? Do you know who that is? I know you're Austrian. Okay, yeah.
A pop singer.
Yeah, what's something that they share?
No, musicality and rhythm in speech.
What's something different between them?
Taylor's work might really be for the, I mean, it's pop cultural. It's for the masses, and I fear that people who might pursue John's work or follow John's work might do it out of necessity and not out of fun, I guess. This might be the biggest difficulty. Not because, oh, this is so fun. I read, I don't know, I read dozens of books, and I listen to this very difficult lecture. I think for most people, right, this is what Nishitani establishes so greatly, right? There is religion is a necessity. Meaning in life is not in a sense optional, and this is also right. This is why we have to do it in a sense. But right, with pop culture, we might it's a little bit different, I guess. We consume it out of fun and not out of necessity, I guess.
Last question. If John had $1 billion mysteriously donated to him and his project, what kind of world do you think our world would look like?
Depends, right? If he could develop with the money a sustainable, intergenerationally functional educational project, or like right, so to really make it lasting, right, make it endurable, so to say, then I would say it could potentially help to really transform, right, to bring about something like an axial age again, or maybe that's too grandiose, but
it's a fun question. Say whatever you want.
But yeah, maybe that's too grandiose, but I think we are at a very critical point in human history, and those wisdom practices are very much necessary. So yeah, but we need educational projects of that kind of that John's doing everywhere. So yeah, that would then be, how would the world look like? I think it would be one that we think is beautiful, and that is not like, I don't know, just an abstraction or so, or a standing resource, as Heidegger might say. So really, right, we rediscover the beauty of the world, and that would be a hopeful outlook, I think. Yeah.
I love you, Daniel. You're the best person.